archetypes crossed my path about a year ago. I started doing some shadow work on myself, and archetypes were the kind of foundation for working on my shadow and finding what was imbalanced in me. This is still a subject that I'm really new at and desiring more information. It's one of the reasons why I have Sierra and Abby on from I Am Alliance. Uh, these two ladies are out of Spokane. They do beautiful work, hold retreats. They're both sound bath practitioners, and just amazing, amazing knowledge comes from these two women. So today we're going to talk about the masculine and the feminine archetypes, how those can be imbalanced and balanced, as well as how that kind of works into our subconscious. So I'm really excited about the conversation today. Hope you get something out of it. We'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome back to our show. Today I'm talking with Ciara Kosse and Abby Buckenberger from I Am Alliance. And I was introduced to these young ladies virtually by another guest that I've had on a couple times, Hannah Talbot. I adore Hannah. She's, like I said, she's like a sister to me. I've shared so much space and knowledge and love with that woman. And so when she said, "Hey, these are the ladies you want to talk to about archetypes and just the journey that they have, the experience that they're giving to their guests, their clients, the help they're offering to this world," it's like, okay, cool, sign me up. Don't even need to meet them first. Let's do this.
Oh, so honored.
So thank you for being with me. I deeply appreciate you sharing your time and your knowledge. I know you have just so much going on. You're getting ready for Costa Rica, which I'm super jealous of. My girlfriend just got back from Costa Rica. I wasn't able to go because we're moving. And every day she sent me videos of monkeys.
Well, we can't wait for them.
Yeah. Yeah. So she sent me a video one day. They were paddleboarding in a mangrove. Which, first off, I'm like, okay, get out of my Disney head. And then she sent me this video of all these spider monkeys flying across things, playing, throwing stuff at them. I'm like, wow,
Oh
I'm in the wrong part of the world right now.
Yeah, that's how we've been feeling for a while.
Yeah. So why don't we start off by just talking about y'all? So where did you guys or you two meet? How did I Am Alliance form? What's the basis of what's going on with y'all?
Yeah. Well, we met in a garage gym in a very different place mentally than we are now.
Uh-huh.
And 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 4 years ago.
Okay.
And I was still in college. I was studying design and beginning my spiritual journey. I was a staunch atheist my whole life, and a tough breakup is what opened my eyes to everything that was always around me. And I was tasked with branding myself in my program, and I couldn't come up with anything because I had just started this journey. I had no idea who I was, and I was not going to box myself in anymore. And so, long story short, my professor helped me and was like, well, just start playing with your initials. My middle name's May, so I was playing with A, M, B, and I just hated the form of B, so I was playing with A and M, and then I was journaling one night and I looked down at my journal and it was just a list of affirmations. I'm brave, I'm worthy, I'm powerful. And I was like, this is it. This is the brand. Yeah. Like, I can be anything. I don't have to be just one thing. I don't have to title myself as just a designer or just an athlete or just a scholar. And so it was really, really a pivotal moment in discovering my own self-worth that created the brand. And we started out as just that, a brand, selling t-shirts. People would choose their affirmation. I would print our little logo, I am, and whatever your word was. And shortly after that concept came to life, Sierra and I we hosted our first retreat. And I got a hold of Sierra and just knew that she had to be there to help lead. I had no idea what I was doing.
And we had only known each other for maybe 3 months at that time. So it was a surprising phone call, to say the least.
And we ended up driving together to the coast, 7+ hour drive. And on our way back was when after such an incredible weekend together, we knew we had to partner. So since then, I Am has evolved into so much more than just t-shirts. Now we are just on a mission spreading this empowerment and level of self-love and awareness to as many people as we can.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we first met, I had just lost, about a year before I had just lost my job.
Okay.
And I was laid off from a corporate position that I had had for over 10 years and opened a personal training center and everything in my mind. I mean, spiritually, totally different place. I had started this journey of like, it started with this thought, like nobody puts baby in the corner. And I felt like if I would have stayed in that job, it literally was like all of God and source saying like, if I don't kick you out of here, you're going to rot in the corner.
Yep. Uh-huh.
So when we met, I mean, I was just so open and so prepared for so many changes, not prepared for what was about to happen, but ready for a change for sure.
Yeah.
So.
And that, I think most of our big moments of change and opportunity in life come from those moments of pain and suffering. So like you were saying, Abby with a breakup, Ciara with corporate job. So there's so many opportunities for us to look at our lives differently when we have those moments of clarity, and good for y'all for finding that and chasing that dream. It's very funny because my personal story kind of follows both of yours. My spiritual journey started after a big breakup. I was a very, very staunch atheist, did not believe in anything that was bigger than me and anything out there. Thought I was just going to go in the ground and rot. Didn't even care one way or the other,
Totally.
And then also, Ciara, I had a corporate job. I worked in corporate restaurants for 20 years. I built teams, took teams apart, hired and fired people, found quote unquote safe ways to get people drunker, and all these things, that, to push the dollar, to maximize profits, that, you can live that life and you can find peace in that. And I'm not saying you can't be spiritual and have a life like that, but for myself, like I had to divorce myself from that life to find the life that was meant for me. Yes. And in those beautiful moments, those tumultuous times that give us the most growth and opportunity to find ourselves.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely all happened for us.
Good.
For sure.
Definitely. I would love the idea for me to find my biggest growth moments on the beach with my feet in the sand looking at the waves, but that doesn't happen. That's when I embrace the growth I've had, right? But when your face is being dragged in the dirt by the hair and you're faced over those damn bumps and bruises, it's like that's when the growth happens.
Yeah, the trials and shadows lead us.
Oh yes.
Absolutely. They're a guide all the time.
Well, I'm glad y'all found each other and found the path to helping humanity, in whatever iteration that is. That's where y'all are at now to where you're growing towards. All the people that you're helping in between is such a beautiful path, and helping yourselves too.
Yes. Oh yeah,
and
we are healing every step of the way.
That's what's up.
We believe that through teaching,
that
will help us more.
Definitely. When we can share the knowledge that we have, it seats it deeper inside of us. When we can become the teachers of the knowledge that we own, then that's, because it's not own, I shouldn't say that word, the knowledge that we've been gifted, we can share that. And then that deepens that understanding that we have. Oh, love that.
So good.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about some archetypes. Like I said, this is a new topic for me. I know the names of, I understand parts of the vocabulary, I understand there's shadow sides, there's balance sides. So last week I had a gentleman on named Ian who does a lot of men's work. He's been doing men's work since he was a child. And right? I'm like, God, man, I didn't find that. I'm 40 years old, just found that. He was doing it since he's 10. And you can tell, like when you talk to people that have been doing work for a long time, like the way they hold space, the vocabulary they use, it's non-threatening, it's very inviting. It's like, I just want to hug you all the time, Ian.
All the
time. But when we brushed over a bit of an archetype idea, and I used the word toxic. And which is, vocabulary I hear a lot, and when we're talking about archetypes, and he actually said, okay, let's not use that word, because when we use the word toxic, in our brains, toxic is something that we can't fix. Toxic waste is something we bury, we ship away somewhere else, we get out of our sight, we don't put work into fixing it. And so when we use the word toxic, that makes it sound like you're always going to be that person. You're always going to be that toxic warrior, that toxic male masculinity, that whatever it is. And there's no coming back from it. And so that imbalance, the shadow vocabulary is a lot. That was a really big step for me to hear him talk to me about that, because it almost gives us permission to we're gonna become imbalanced at times. but it's
Oh,
up to our
absolutely.
consciousness to understand that and bring us back.
Yes. And that's why we love the scope and the lens of the archetypes so much, is because we've been training them our whole lives subconsciously. And it's just a way to illuminate what we've been reiterating in our minds.
Right.
So the shadows are just another lens to look at. Okay, I've been operating in a really domineering huntress or warrior because I'm afraid of losing control or being out of control.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just another way to look at those inner shadows, and we find them really, really helpful and powerful, because even if somebody has never heard of the archetypes, once we start talking about them, it unlocks something.
Right.
Like, oh, I do have an inner priestess or a magician. I feel that when I hear the ping, or when I know something's going to happen before it happens, I resonate. So they're really just powerful tools to begin to look at your subconscious.
Yeah. And learning the tool consciously, knowing that you have this new information, this new knowledge that you've always known, but now you have this connection to, and you can really start to lean into that in these shadow states.
Yeah. And I think, the subconscious piece was something that made a lot of sense once it was told to me, but I never put that part together with it. And the subconscious side, that really spoke to me, with the idea of, like we're all beings that are made from ethereal stardust and like bits and pieces of this and that. Like part of my water might have been in a whale's belly at one point in time, thousands and millions of years ago. So you have this ancestral DNA, this ancestral stuff that comes with our DNA, right? With the cells that are built within us. Yeah. And there's a lot of this subconscious stuff that's built in, right? Like we're all this innately afraid of snakes, innately afraid of spiders, innately afraid of darkness, because that was the stuff that we were exposed to when we didn't have protection. And so the idea that these stories, these archetypes are also subconscious, because just like you said, Abby, when we start talking about them to people that might not understand it, they're like, I do recognize that. So that's that another layer of this ancestral story that's been passed down, lineage that we don't even realize, but we embrace. It's so beautiful to just like feel that.
And empowering. So it's like, I do know. I don't have to know cognitively or study for years to know this information. Because once it's spoken and you hear it and it resonates, that's a deeper knowing than any textbook could ever give you. Yeah. Definitely. So it really does anchor it in a different way.
Yeah. And that radical awareness gives you, again, that empowerment. I mean, it really just creates this like full embodiment of like, okay, yeah, I do embrace all of these things. And even the shadow side of all of these archetypes, these characteristics that you start to learn about yourself, that you're like, okay, I see where that's coming from. And like you say, Adam, with the lineage and everything, like this isn't from this body in this time, but I do experience this and I do feel this. And I have this awareness now to help shift and support this journey.
Yeah. The shadows develop through the fears, the innate fears that we are passed down with or experienced from childhood. So
right. There's I think we both listened to this gentleman. I think Hannah was telling me that. Do you guys listen to Aubrey Marcus?
Oh yeah.
Right. So I get so much information from that guy and the guests that he has on. I really appreciate his podcast so much.
Yes.
And there's a word that he uses quite a bit, and you guys probably heard it, but it's knowing with a capital G. Right. And it's play off the word gnosis, that internal knowing, that intrinsic knowledge that we have that we don't care to explain. We just feel it and we understand it. And that knowing, like you were talking about, that's that same thing. Like, I don't care if you don't believe what I understand, but I know it so deeply within me that I'm cool with that. Like it's intrinsic within the human being that I am. Yes. And I hope that you find it. But if you don't, that's not something that concerns me, because like you just know, right?
Yes. And they have their path and will be shown in whatever way speaks to them. Yeah. And it doesn't always have to be the archetypes or us.
No. And I think that's the loving awareness that once we start to learn all that within ourselves, that we can really embrace, another conversation or another human being wherever they're at and meet them where they're at in their path.
Yes. Because full compassion. Yes. And trust that everyone will be shown exactly when they're ready.
Right. And Ciara, that message is such an important message at this point in time in our lives, in this you know, the atmosphere that we live in. There's so much polarity. There's so much opportunity for divisiveness, you know, and I think one of the biggest messages that I've gotten from these past few years, not like side versus side, me versus you, mask, blah, blah, whatever. I don't fucking care. Right. But it's the ability to disagree and still respect somebody.
Yeah.
We don't, just because I don't agree with you doesn't mean I don't like you as a human being or that I'm against you and your family. And I think in the West, we've really come to embrace that as a reality. Like, you agree with me, cool, we're friends. If you don't agree with me, get fucked. It's like, no.
And look at how telling that is of a dysregulated nervous system.
Oh my
like
gosh.
We perceive threat so quickly now that it is separation and distance that we think keeps us safe.
Agree from this person.
Yeah.
Disbelief.
Yep.
Which is also so many of the shadow sides of archetypes that we talk about all day long.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Well, let's dive into them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to start with the feminine archetypes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And I have a question real quick before we get into feminine and male archetypes, masculine archetypes, I should say. Are they specific to, and I don't want to use the word gender because we have so much difference with he, she, they, them, you know, like there's not gender specific things now.
Yeah.
But are there balances, like, do I embrace and embody feminine archetypes as well as masculine archetypes?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So another lens that we teach this through is you have two main energy channels running through your body that weave around your central sushumna, your central energy channel. And it's called the Ida and the Pingala, and one is masculine and one is feminine. So when we speak to the divine archetypes through masculine and feminine lenses, it's all coming from an energetic place. So every being, no matter what their gender is, holds a masculine and a feminine energy inside of themselves that behaves differently dependent on its situation.
Right.
Okay.
And some of us predominantly operate in feminine flow, and some of us predominantly operate in masculine action.
Yeah. And I think I want to add something to that real quick. Abby and I, when we first met, something that really clicked with us is we both really lived in that masculine state. The way we were living out our lives and our relationships, I think, is actually how we connected so well, is because we really saw each other as a mirror where we were in our lives, not just physically, but this emotional, energetic exchange that we were both living so heavily in our masculine.
Yeah. And I guess just to break those two energies down a little bit further, is the feminine is very associated with feeling and emotion and expression and energy. The feminine is the energy that is brought to the table, and the masculine is the depth and the presence. So being very solid, very grounded, very protective, very stable.
Okay.
It holds the container for the feminine to flow and be free.
All right.
So if our inner masculine is feels unsafe, the feminine's not going to come out.
No.
Because she has no stability in her life to move.
Yeah.
So us living in a hyper masculine state, which one is not an issue only if it's unnatural to you. So we predominantly naturally want to lie in that feminine flow, but we were fighting ourselves so much to be able to control our food, our workout regimen, our relationships, because at the end of the day, we were scared. We were afraid and threatened subconsciously by all of these things around us.
Yeah. And learning that these archetypes, I think also comes down to like the bottom line of understanding why we are in that state, why we are in that character, why we are in that energy. And we start to identify, okay, this is obviously a symptom, why I'm this emotion or why I'm this expression based on whatever trauma I've experienced, again, in this lifetime or lineage. So a lot of that energetic energy that we were carrying isn't just because of something we naturally wanted to do. No, it was what our body was doing in fight or flight and to protect us.
Wow.
Yeah. Definitely wasn't conscious at the time.
No.
Right. Yeah. And I think, I think a lot of us live in that unconscious state. I can honestly say before I started my personal journey, my spiritual journey, I was definitely heavy in the masculine side and just pegged work until I until I couldn't see straight, and it was all justifiable, right? I did it for my kids. I did it for my family. That's what my
Yes.
dad did. He worked his ass off. So that was my role model. Right.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until, you could finally, whatever it was for me, the breakup, that I slowed down and stopped and finally looked at myself. I'm like, dude, you're fucking miserable, man. What's
Yeah.
going on with this life? You still got a long life to live, man. You better figure this out, and that's when we started listening to those voices, the intuition, instead of going to the bar, I went to yoga, and then yoga turned to meditation. It's like, all right, cool. Let's find this healthy path.
Totally. And your body was like telling you this whole time, like, this isn't safe anymore. Yeah. Like whatever it is that you're doing, that you're still telling yourself is not where you want to be. Like your body will continue to do that. And will either fight it or finally at some point have
surrender.
This. Yeah.
And if you're listening, I mean, similar to all three of our stories, this is not uncommon, especially in the West, because we are a masculinely dominated society.
Yes.
For hundreds of thousands of years, we have found that action produces, and when we produce, we provide for our families, and that is how we stay safe and live and eat and are protected. So we have adopted that belief. It's been unrivaled because we can look back at how many feminine entities have been burned at the stake for being connected to their intuition. It was very stifled for a long time. And so if you're listening and you're feeling similar, like, oh my gosh, I am burnt out, I'm heavy in my masculine, and I don't necessarily want to be, have no shame about that, because our society's really cultivated that.
Right.
It's woven through at least the United States values. And so
and that all really aligns with the shadows of these archetypes. How we predominantly live in, if we live in these shadows, that we can correlate it with these actions now, how we live, because of the shadows that we are actually expressing and living in every single day.
Yeah.
So just no shame around any of those at all.
No.
Because there's a lot of influences at play, and there's no ill intent. Like for the longest time, this was just to keep us safe.
It's so valid. You don't feel that, any shame or guilt around that.
Right.
Yeah. And more ease is coming, and you are so deserving of it.
Exactly. I think about that I correlate that with meditation for me. When I first started meditating, I used to beat myself up when my mind would wander, and I'm like, oh, come on, get back here, And, but that's what our mind's programmed to do. It's programmed to wander, right?
Yeah.
If you're living in an unconscious type of way, no disrespect to anybody, but sometimes it takes a while to find us like, oh shit, I'm not living within my full means. And if you're not living consciously, then you're more susceptible to those triggers and to those ideas and just falling victim to them, and it's that same kind of idea. Don't beat yourself up. That's the way the world's designed. That's the way we've designed ourselves to stay afloat and to to live in this fast-paced world. So when you notice that, that's your opportunity to correct that, right? It's every time my mind wanders when I'm meditating is an opportunity for me to bring myself back here and not shame myself and not guilt myself, because that's the whole thing that we have to fix anyways. That's where the trauma comes from.
Right.
So when we can reparent ourselves and love ourselves and find that understanding of like, oh, Adam, that little 7-year-old, stop thinking about Snickers and come back to your meditation. Breath on top of your lip, buddy. Come on, we're good to go.
Oh, so good.
So good.
Well, let's dive into the archetypes. So with the feminine archetypes, so we have 4 that we'll talk about today: the Queen, Lover, Priestess, and the Huntress.
Yes.
Okay. So so with Queen, what does a balanced Queen archetype look like?
So a balanced queen is someone who leads her queendom consciously. So some terms that come up for me are: she's very devoted, very regal, very conscious, and deliberate in her delegation. So the queen is leading all the other archetypes to perform in a way that's the most supportive to your truth. And if we have an imbalanced queen or a fearful queen, she's going to make decisions in an abrupt way, in a really domineering way, or in a really passive way. You can go, there's a scale. You can go super domineering and abrasive, or super passive, and I'm just going to ignore the chaos that's ensuing in my here because I don't know what to do.
Okay.
Like a freeze response.
So like a imbalanced queen archetype, if we want to look at a character, might be the queen from Alice in Wonderland, the Queen of Hearts.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. Perfect.
Nailed
Okay.
it.
Cool. All right. And so, so living in that balance, you know, you are able to see clearly, you're able to delegate clearly, hold space for folks, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And so imbalance, what is an imbalanced?
Oh my gosh. Well, she would just be so indecisive. And again, on all scales, like this aloof, kind of dismissive, passive, and super overbearing though too, like overprotective, over directive, over all the things that it's like, kind of like think of the queen that's pointing the fingers and like, well, you're doing that wrong. Or I asked you to do this and how come you're not doing this? So, punishing. Absolutely. Yeah. So there's definitely this scale of just like, sometimes we say like, you know, are you the partner or the parent? So if you're going to sit there and parent, you know, your significant other,
right? Maybe
you should look at your queendom.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm sure we'll get into this with the other archetypes, but oftentimes if you're feeling, like if the shadow side resonates with you and you're like, oh, I figured it out. It's my queen is wounded. Everything else is fine. Oftentimes, if we look a little bit deeper, your queen might not be the one holding the core wound. It might be your lover who is desperately fearful and distrusting of love. And she's crying out for help. And so your queen has just taken that hurt on and, okay, I don't know how to fix this, but I'm going to try. And so getting to the core, whoever's hurt, holding that wound is like the root of the disbelief, the limiting belief, or the pain.
Okay.
And it's tricky to articulate that and to find out which one is really harboring and clinging to that story.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's kind of a common denominator in all the archetypes where every archetype is almost paired with another. So like Abby just explained, it could be your lover, but you're expressing it through this queen expression of like, okay, well, I'm going to have to protect my queendom. And so I have to do all of these things, but really it's this pairing of this trauma, of this shadow or what have you, that's being embodied really in your lover. So to understand it more, and again, back to what Abby said too, like, don't shame yourself or guilt yourself if you're hearing these things and make you think like, oh, I can be really overbearing. And I definitely, you know, parent my partner, like we all do that. We all do that.
We all experienced the shadow, and there's still moments where I can see, oh, she's coming out. Yes. She's feeling threatened. And how do we respond now? And it's really tough in that instant to shift our behavior. That's what the practice is for. And that's why the opportunities are showing themselves. Yeah. Here's another chance. So
that's why it's a practice.
It's hard.
Right. Yeah. It's not a perfect, it's a practice. Right? We tell our yoga students that all the time. It's a yoga practice. Get in here and do your best. That's all we ask, you know?
Love it.
So would you say for the queen archetype is that not necessarily like there's a ranking scale, but like since the queen archetype is super strong, that person steps up and basically is like the protector, the team leader of like, okay, I see this coming. I'm going to hold this. I know this is for the lover, but I'm going to hold on to this pain and let the lover kind of like move through that and then like hold that space. Let's work on that together.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I feel, she can be. It really is dependent on whichever archetype makes you feel the safest will be the one that you subconsciously call on to protect. So it could be your huntress who you're like, nope, we're going to fight this instead of,
especially if you live in your masculine. If you are a masculine, yes. Yeah.
So,
okay.
I would say in a balanced system, yes, the queen is the leader. She's the one calling the shots and consciously making that decision in the moment to shift the narrative.
Okay.
Yeah, you hear us say queendom. So it's like when you think of your queendom, you think of the huntress, the lover, and all of your archetypes underneath that you know, you want to control protect.
Right on. Okay. All right. So, Queen, where do you want to go from there?
Let's go to lover since we're talking about
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. What does a balanced lover look like?
Well, I think that the first word I think of is harmony. I always think of the lover and harmony, not necessarily balance, but trying to bring harmony to all the emotions and like making sure that everyone feels good and that it feels good around you and that you feel good about everything that you're doing. Definitely sensual is another one that comes up, that there's this harmony also with all the intimate relations that we have, sensual and non-sensual. And I just think that, again, harmony is like the number one underline, that you just feel like everything feels good. It's definitely that expression of feeling everything in your emotions.
And openness through those emotions, because the number one way to block your lover or to get into that shadow archetype of the lover is to not open. It's to close yourself off and to hold all of those feelings and those emotions that you're experiencing that are true and are very valid inside, because we don't want to share or express. And especially both for the masculine and the feminine, I feel like the masculine oftentimes struggles a little bit more with the verbal expression and processing, just because it hasn't been normalized.
Right.
We joke all the time with our partners that we could just gab away for hours and hours on end about every last emotion and feeling we're having. But it's because that's where the feminine wants to be, and especially the lover. So closing that channel off is a really quick way to get into the shadow side.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That brings up to me, there's a book I read not too long ago, How to Do the Work. It's Nicole LaPera. Great. She's, I love this woman. She's very, very heavy on Instagram. I can't remember her handle off the top of my head, but I'll put it in the show notes. But she's just does amazing work for psychiatry and just holistic psychiatry. And she, in that book, she talks about how one of the most, in her opinion, one of the most balanced emotional states we can be in is when we're a toddler. And so when you start talking about the lover and that balanced emotions, and it's not like, if we just say that without context to it, it's like, what the hell does that mean? Toddlers throw tantrums, they run around, they're crying, but that's it. That's exactly it. They live that emotion that they experience right then and there. They're not pushing it aside. They're not like, oh, dad's not ready for me to throw this tantrum. It's like, oh, you know what? I didn't get that Oreo. Get ready for this tantrum, buddy. And so like, but exactly how that toddler feels at every single point in their life, because they're not trying to filter, they're not trying to shelter. They're happy, they're elated, they're running around, they're good, and then they bump their knee, and then everything ends for 5 minutes. And so I just love that idea, and that's, I love the concept of, the few people that we may have thought have found enlightenment or some kind of like ascension of some sort, like Dalai Lama or Gandhi, Mother Teresa, these beautiful figures in the world. And when you really look at them, when they've quote unquote reached that level of whatever whatever they're at, there's this childlike reverence to them. Everything is like awe and wonder, like, this is beautiful. Every person gets their undivided attention. Their emotions are felt, they're experienced. And that really, that makes me think of these beautiful little children that are just untouched, undamaged. They're here, they're experiencing the world, and it's just beautiful.
So beautiful and so present with everything coming through.
Very much so. Yeah, I feel like the lover can be really inquisitive. I definitely think that if we were to go into more of the shadow about the lover, there's this people pleasing that really starts to happen. There's a lot of clinging, a lot of like
codependency kind of thing,
insecurities that really start to come through.
Okay.
With the shadow side of the lover.
I see that in myself quite a bit. I saw that in my past relationships. I was very much a chameleon, and the lover was one for me. As soon as I saw that, I'm like, wow, I've been in balance for a long time in that one. Didn't love myself, but didn't, it's one of those things you don't realize it until you realize it, and it's your work to do once you realize it. So,
yeah, and I feel like it's a very common one to be imbalanced in, because we're so relationally charged. We are meant to be in this community with one another. And sometimes it's not as easy to, Ciara won't throw a tantrum that I can just say, oh, okay, she's upset right now. You know, it's like, it's not that easy. And so we're looking at all of our different cues and body language and energy. And so it can be difficult to perceive. And we write those narratives based on those perceptions, and those can be false. So undoing them is a lot of work.
Yeah, especially if it has anything to do with people pleasing and codependency. I mean, those are really hard ones to detach from, because those are just so deeply embedded. I mean, you know, we live from our heart from that expression. So it's like, I'm either hurt or not loved, I'm unseen, but this is the only way that I'm going to, so I'm going to cling to this, and I'm not going to, you know, think of myself first.
Yep. And on a surface level, unconsciously, you could feel like you're doing everything right because you're pleasing your partner. You're eating where the partner wants to eat. You're dressing the way, you're speaking the way, watching the movies, whatever it is, right? And you feel like, oh, cool, this person's happy, I should be happy. But down deep, it's like, man, I am miserable and don't even realize why.
And just desperate to be really seen and heard. So then we create these scenarios that our subconscious brain says, okay, once they respond the way I want them to respond, then I'll know they really do love me. It's like we trick them. We try to.
Oh yeah. I mean, we could go down a whole spiral of this with our ego and manipulation. We talk a lot about narcissistic behaviors and stuff just because it comes up so naturally. And that's probably a tough word to hear if you're listening to this and feel like you've experienced that or are experiencing it even currently. It's really common, and I think it's just not discussed a whole lot. But the second we start to really share and express all of these characteristics of the archetypes, it really does start to correlate and kind of underline some of these behaviors that we're so afraid to share. I mean, we're just afraid to share our shadow. So
I think you hit something really strong for me, Ciara, is that we just need to normalize hard conversations. We need to get normal about talking about how our feelings make us feel, how upset we are when we're upset. I mean, to the things that nobody wants to talk about, like abortion or menstrual cycles or, you know, ED, like all these things, like this is just life. Like this is, we're shy about it. That's normal. Things just happen, right? This is our body. This is our life. Talk about it. Let's normalize this shit.
Absolutely. And sharing our stories helps other people feel safe in theirs.
And that's all we want to do, right? We're raising the collective. We're raising this frequency to make sure everyone feels seen, heard, loved, appreciated, acknowledged, no matter good, bad, ugly, and indifferent.
Love that. Beautiful. All right. Priestess. Let's move on to priestess. So what does a balanced priestess look like?
This is one of our favorite. I mean, we say that to every single one of them, but I think about priestess
because she's the magic. She's the intuitive, the gnosis with the knowing with the G. She's the alchemizer of the energies. And there are a lot of ways that our priestess can be shunned or pressed down, especially in society or maybe certain religious upbringings, and that's on all sides of the spectrum. Having this innate knowing and connection to source is scary for a lot of people who don't feel it. So when we see that, when we perceive that outside of ourselves, it's easy to detach and say, I'm not that. I don't have that. Or be afraid of it. When really it's one of your strongest superpowers. So a balanced priestess is very fluid, very intuitive, is able to alchemize that energy moment by moment.
So trusting of herself, of that knowing. So trusting.
And that, you know, that brings up a lot, like the witch trials back in the day, you know, like you have, again, that ancestral stuff that's in our DNA, you know, and how this entire gender, right? This entire gender that it's, you know, it's so interesting. I can't remember actually, you know, it was an Aubrey Marcus podcast. It was Mateus DeStefano. I just listened to it a couple weeks ago, and Mateus was talking about how, before the witch trials happened, when there were matriarchal societies, a lot of the women, they were intuitive, and they gathered in groups, and they worshipped they worshipped the goat, because the goat was the provider of everything. Like the horn can call everybody to dinner. The milk fed us, it gave us calcium. The meat gave us substance. The skin gave us something that we could either wear or make teepees out of, right? So we had like this entire animal that we could use. But when the patriarch took over, they had to demonize it, and so they made the goat the sign of the devil and demonized women for worshiping the devil. And then all of a sudden, like all these intuitive, beautiful human beings that were listening to Mother Nature, listening to themselves, in touch with the world in ways we could never understand, were basically demonized and burned. And so now, to speak to what you're talking about with that imbalanced priestess, that's DNA, right? You sharing your gifts got your ancestors killed in a very violent way not too long ago. So why, and you know, what's even funnier is I just read something recently, and I don't know how true this is. I'm just going to put this out there. I don't know how true this is, but what I read was the reason women don't have pockets in their clothing anymore was because that's what they used to keep all their things in, right? Their talismans, their stones, their oils, the witchery stuff, right? And so after the Salem witch trials, women weren't allowed to have pockets anymore because they weren't allowed to hide things on themselves.
Yeah.
How crazy is that? I know. Good Lord. And I'm a yoga instructor. You know how many times I hear women bitching about not having pockets
I was
within
just going to say it's a huge complaint.
Oh my God. And just to, even if there's an inkling of truth to that story, that just shows how deep some of this systemic stuff that we deal with, we don't even realize how deep it goes.
Oh my gosh. It hits
huge. Yeah. The severity of that is just absolutely blows my mind and makes me think like, and then when we started getting pockets, remember how small they were?
Tiny.
Little jeans.
Yeah, we have cell phones the size of this, and then we have like pockets that big. Like, I don't understand that.
Put a crystal in it.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Not to bring any pun to it.
Oh man, so I would imagine the priestess is a very potentially a lot of imbalance for a lot of people out there because of that fear, that innate fear that we have.
Because when we start to like disbelieve or tell ourselves that we don't believe those things, I mean, that's the purest part of the shadow, I think, where it's like, I know this, I'm not going to express it though, because I'm afraid, right? And I'm fearful of whatever it is. I think that disbelief is huge in the shadow.
Yeah. And the operating unconsciously, the priestess and the magician, the masculine archetype, holds so much energy because they're so influenced and so sensitive to their surroundings that it can create like chaos magic. You don't know that you're
because this is like
influencing
energy here.
Or breeding a really difficult scenario or argument with your partner.
Creating in your head.
And then here it is. Here you go. You called for this.
Right.
But we don't know. We don't know that we hold that power. And then the same side, we don't know that we can manifest. We don't understand that we can actually call on the things that we desire because we've never felt the belief it takes to do that.
Right.
So
because we've been told that the only way that you can attain those things is through productivity, working really hard, you know, feeling in all of that hurt masculine energy. And I think when we talk about manifestation, I mean, it really does come from this belief and trusting of your magician and your priestess energy, that it's like when you're really in that flow state, in that the harmonizing of that archetype, I mean, again, you can manifest chaotic energy or
subconsciously.
Totally.
All right. Yeah, you got to be careful. That's like holding Moldavite. Like somebody gave me Moldavite one time, and I'm like, no, get that away from me. I don't know what I'm manifesting right now. I'm not controlling this. Get this shit away.
So I think when you're feeling really chaotic, I mean, if you're listening and you're like, okay, how do I know if I'm living here in a healthy way or like a harmonious way? I mean, when things around you feel chaotic, when you're not really taking the time to sit and like find your center again and just come back home, I think that's huge for magician and priestess.
Yes.
Because it is so intuitive. You know, it's really the deepest part of the
and
core of these
easy.
energies.
It should all come so effortlessly because we're that powerful. And if you begin to use that power in a way that is untruthful, it will feel manipulative. And that's where you get into relationships where you are tricking your partner, manipulating your partner, because your priestess is using her magic to find love in the way that your brain thinks that you need it. So manipulation is also another side of the coin, the shadow side of the priestess and the magician.
Yeah. And I can imagine if you're very understanding of these archetypes, but don't have a good basis for the knowledge, then you can use these to manipulate people pretty
Absolutely.
well. You know, it's like people that know personality traits really well. They can watch facial cues and things like that. And, you know, that can be used for very good and that can be used for very negative things.
Yeah. When you start to see things manifesting in your day-to-day life, even like, what's the saying? Everything bad hits in threes. So you stub your toe, you hit your head on the cabinet, and you lock your keys in your car. And it's like thinking, well, I thought I woke up on the right side of the bed, but like, where did this energy come from that I started truly manifesting these negative things to happen to me? Ask yourself, like, is it coming from a real place of love?
Yeah.
Like, oh, you stubbed your toe because you were in a hurry because you felt guilty or you felt whatever. So there's this trickle effect of, you know, how we truly do manifest these things to happen in our day-to-day life.
Stay strong.
Yes.
Gotta be careful. Gotta be careful. All right. Well, let's move on to Huntress. This is the last of the four for women, or for the feminine archetypes, I should say. So balanced Huntress. What does a balanced Huntress look like?
Well, I love the Huntress. I think we, again, can say that we know the Huntress very, very well.
And the shadow side of
the shadow side of the Huntress very, very well. Very disciplinary, though, and living in that sovereign righteousness of your discipline, your discernment, and showing up in true agency for yourself, taking a strong stance in this deep belief and knowing. And obviously the protective part of you that wants to come out to say like, whoa, wait, this is really going to like hurt my heart if I don't stand up for myself here. This is really going to hurt my intuitive knowing if someone's going to like bash me for what it is that I'm sharing, right? Like I'm going to come out and show my energy and my true magic that someone's going to. So the Huntress really just puts you in this disciplinary state of you being able to show up in the best agency and discernment for your truest self. Yeah.
And the protective Huntress will want to come out for all of those subconscious fears and keep you from them in the way she thinks she knows is best, and it usually is not. But the balanced Huntress is very poised in her armor and her stance. She knows
very
what is
sovereign.
Yes,
very sovereign.
What is true and how to protect that in a way that is honoring versus perpetuating a negative loop.
Okay. All right. For some reason, this makes me think of like the Na'vi people from Avatar, you know, just like that female warrior, you know, just stoic, unmovable, like very confident in her abilities to protect herself, but also protect everybody around her.
Yes. In such an honoring way. I mean, even hunting and making a kill, it's like, I'm going to bless and honor this creature for providing me with life instead of just taking advantage of the environment or abusing her power.
Beautiful.
Well, very sporadic in that decision making. So it's like when you kind of like decide off of a whim without actually truly listening to your truest self.
Reactive is the shadow.
Okay. Yeah, I feel the Huntress, you know, the shadow side of the Huntress. I think, you know, and it might be just the era of the world that we live in right now. Just like we were talking about how the shadow side of the Queen having to step up and be more masculine than we need to be. You know, I think that Huntress, it seems like there is a lot more of that on the imbalance side too. Whether it's out of necessity, it's out of just the way that the world has been manifesting in the West, at least, you know, for the past couple hundred years. But it's it's you know, it's and it so do some of these become imbalanced out of necessity, you know, like just the era of the world that we're in, so we need to be a little heavier on this right now?
Absolutely. And I think that heaviness and where we err more on that scale comes from our trauma. It comes from the symptoms that we're living in, because we're all going to react based on this scarcity or safety, emotional, intuitive reaction that we have from patterns and all of these behaviors. So no matter what the social climate and the state of the world that we're living in, we're all still going to show up in these emotions, whether you know anything about the archetypes or not, based purely off of our fears and our, the
earliest fears.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So I think definitely leaning does happen. Like, okay, I need to protect my queendom, and I don't know my shadows of it, but that's where they're coming from, because that's the trauma I've experienced, and those are the symptoms I live in.
Right.
Yeah, and I would say that the shadows will present themselves out of necessity to show you down the line. Like the shadows will come out to show you your capacity and to teach you what is imbalanced and where your core fears are. They are symptoms.
They're always going to come up first. The shadow wants to come. I mean, the shadow's there because the shadow's following you around and saying like, wait. No. I can teach you better or more or show you more. But it's always going to come first, because we're so adapted to leading with that fear. We're so adapted to being guided by that, because we always want to do what's safe. And our body and our ego, and especially our cognitive mind, is going to tell us what is safest for us. Now, when we know our truest self, and we really do understand that, the huntress is there to protect and be disciplined, and the queen is, all of these things, then we can really show up in our truth and say, hold up, shadow. Like, no, thank you. It doesn't keep me safe anymore. Right? Like how we expressed what we've experienced to get to this part in our journey, that all three of us, like if it wasn't for this kind of catastrophic experience, our shadows would have kept continuing to lead. So,
yeah.
All perfectly here for a reason.
Yes.
Exactly. And I think that's part of it. When we find ourselves in balance, it's showing yourself love to get yourself back into balance, and not shaming and guilting yourself for the imbalance.
Yes.
In anything in life, whether it's an archetype, whether it's a loved one, whatever you're working towards. I think that self-shame and guilt is where we really get the trauma triggers,
Absolutely.
And kind of back to what you said, Adam, like, let's have the hard conversations because all of that will just completely disappear for all of us if we were really truthful with one another and didn't judge and didn't guilt or shame, especially ourselves, but one another. I mean, to show that
unconditional love
right,
between two individuals is the only thing that's going to get us to this real universal place of peace.
That's beautiful. I do agree. I do appreciate that. Well, with the interest of time, since we're getting close to 2:00, I don't want to take your time up. But I just want to go through the 4 male ones real quick, and because we talked about there's as human beings we embody both masculine and feminine. So for the masculine archetypes, we have the king, lover, warrior, and the magician. Right.
Yeah.
And in ways, are they similar to the feminine archetypes? Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I would say they, like your king and your queen, you hold both, and they want to relate to one another and hold your kingdom or queendom in the best way they can. And the main difference will be that your masculine archetypes are the depth, the presence, and the stability.
Okay.
They're the ones that hold that sacred space for the feminine to be able to use her magic and express.
Because the feminine wants to be led by the masculine.
Yes,
the queen wants to be
badly
led by the king.
Gotcha. Okay.
So the masculine archetypes are the leaders in that. And because the divine feminine is so innately connected to source and Mother Earth, whatever name you prefer, the masculine is less so. And so he will lean on her for the knowing. So like the king will call the action shots and this is what we need to do in order to be successful. And he'll lean on his queen to say, how does this feel? How does this feel? Is there an imbalance? Is something off? Because she can sense the people are unhappy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the king wants to invite in that harmony, right? He, again, is all action. But it's also based on coming from the purest place of love. So it's like, well, queen, how does this feel? Is this harmonious? Is this,
or
does this
will
feel,
it be?
Will it be? Exactly.
Because the masculine is so beautifully present. The feminine is able to, like, they're in the future and in this like ethereal space, or living in the past and deciphering and analyzing, and the masculine's just here. Yeah. And so can you help me, queen, realize what this action will ensue in the future, or priestess or magician? Can you help me see further?
Abby has a beautiful expression, description of it, where the king really is this like focus. It's this narrow visionary. And the direct, very direct. Okay. And feminine is so 360. I mean, she's so broad and just, she can see and witness everything. And so the two, I mean, the marriage and the harmony of both is that, you know, like, okay, well, what do you see out here? Like, this is where I'm at. Like, what can we bring in
to get to the point faster?
Yeah.
So
or skip a step or skip an obstacle.
Okay. So in a truly balanced human being, like say we were balanced in our archetypes, it's almost like a council of elders then, huh? So you have like kings consulting queens, consulting lovers, consulting magicians, and just like, oh, what's the best output for this human being? Let's all work together and figure this out.
And there's no secret sauce or formula, because we're all so different. And that's what's so beautiful is some people will really be predominantly in their magician and their inner alchemist. And some people will be naturally want to be in their lover, and that's where their magic is. So yeah, there's no one size fits all. It's really just coming
into union.
Yeah.
There you go. Do you, last question, do you find there's a more standard imbalanced archetype than most? Like, say, male archetypes or masculine archetypes, it's the king. If it's feminine archetypes, it's the priestess. You know, do you find there's a commonality of either this one seems to be imbalanced mostly, this one seems to be totally imbalanced mostly? You know, just
That's
working.
a tricky one.
Yeah. I don't know if I can speak for both of us in this, but maybe I can when I say universally, like globally. I don't know if there's an answer for that, but what we've experienced, especially at sound baths and our retreats, I definitely think with the masculine, there is an imbalance with the king, mostly that I've seen and witnessed. You know, I mean, we do so much somatic touch and get into people's energies so deeply that it's always this crown. There's always this disconnect. And of course, like I said before, I always feel that they're paired with another archetype. And so I would definitely say for the masculine, it's the king and the lover.
That's what I was going to say, the lover.
Yeah, that hits home a lot. You know, one of the conversations I had not too long ago was about the examples that we have in the world right now, and a lot of the examples of the king archetype is very, very imbalanced, and that's where I started using the word toxic, because you know, a lot of the male, let's say, leaders, right? Whether you're a leader of a country, leader of a company, leader of whatever household, sometimes, right? It's just there's this domineering, you know, do as I say, I'm the, you know, the holder of knowledge kind of idea. And it's that in a way it's almost celebrated, and that's really sad. And you know, so that was, I agree 100%, because, you know, for me, it's the king is imbalanced because we're not able to feel the love that we need to feel, and we're not able to embrace and step into that fullness of, I feel my emotions, I embrace my emotions, I cry, you know, whatever it is, you know, when all we do is go around with this stoic nature and we don't embrace our emotions. And what kind of example is that leading for all these children that are around us? You know, myself included. I'm a child at heart, right? You know, and easily influenced. So, you know, if we're all walking around unconscious, and the seeming, you know, person that's getting shit done is this, you know, very imbalanced male archetype, then man, that's hard to compete against.
Oh yeah.
And I would have to say for the feminine, again, my perspective of just from where we've come from and the work that we've done, I would have to say the pairing would be huntress and lover. I think it's hard to say to not have the lover be part of it for both feminine and masculine, because really we all just are coming home and learning to love ourselves. I mean, over and over and over. That's just what we're doing.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm a little biased with the Huntress just because that's where I lived for so many years, but it's just a really common thread with so many women that we've been, you know, in contact with energetically, that they're just so heavily in their masculine.
Oh, and defensive.
Right. Yeah. There's a book that I read not too long ago named by a guy named Kamal Ravikant. It's how to love yourself like your life depends on it. And it's a great book, and it talks a lot about, Ciara, what you were just talking about, how we need to find ways to show love to ourselves. And one of the practices he has is that when you find yourself guilting or shaming yourself, if you have a mirror, look in the mirror. If not, just stop and close your eyes. But 10 times, if you can, inhale, tell yourself, I love myself. Exhale, say thank you. And just, if you could look at yourself in the eyes and tell yourself you love yourself 10 times, that's so moving. Like looking at somebody else in the eyes is moving, but when you can give yourself that time and that space to honor yourself and to see deep inside your humanness.
Yes, that feels so good to hear you say that.
Oh, it's beautiful work. It's hard work, but you know, it's you know, like I have a friend, Robin, that says, you know, life's the longest thing we'll ever do. Might as well do something productive with it, right? So find some work to do on yourself, help somebody else out. You know, it's just, we've got so much time in this world to do with it as we wish. You know, I'd love to do something positive with it.
Oh my gosh, yes, and you are. Thank you so much for bringing us into your space.
Truly honored.
Truly honored.
Oh, well, I desire a longer conversation, so I will be reaching out to y'all. You know, actually, I have some plans to come over to Spokane, and you know, help Hannah with the opening of her new business, and maybe do some sound baths down there.
Amazing.
I would love to hook up with y'all and meet you in person, and maybe do an in-person interview. We could talk more about sound baths and subconscious mind, and just get nitty-gritties and stuff.
Yes, I feel like we could go all day, all day.
Beautiful. Well, I don't want to take any more of your time. I know you have so much to do. You're getting ready for Costa Rica. You have so many cool things happening. I wish you both the best and the most amazing retreats and the sharings of love and information that y'all have. And thank you very, very much for just taking time out of your busy days to sit with me and to educate our guests and educate our listeners. I really, really deeply appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
This was incredible. Thank you, everybody listening.
Perfect. Well, y'all have a beautiful day. We will connect soon.
Awesome. You too.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Thank you so much for spending time with Abby, Ciara, and myself, the I Am Alliance crew. Very, very excited about the content today, and also excited to have them back to talk more about just life and spirituality. I feel like we can talk forever. But if you like what we're doing, please subscribe to the podcast, give us a rating if you feel so inclined, or also leave some comments and share it with your friends. Let's get the comments and the information out there. Thank you so much for joining me. Obeisance and love to you all. See you next time.